guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about why memory doesn't matter when it comes to language learning and why is it that you forget easily, or so you think. Since time immemorial, people have been asking this question not only when it comes to learning English, but pretty much about learning anything. Like, how do I improve my memory? Why can I seem to remember words even after studying and reviewing them for so long? How do I overcome forgetfulness? And for someone like me, who seemingly have an extensive amount of vocabulary to pop onto the scene, it can seem like I have a superhuman memory. Well, this couldn't be further from the truth. Memorizing vocab, as we know, it consists mostly of staring at the vocabulary list, copying them onto your paper 4 or 5 times, reading them out loud 10 times, and hoping for dear life that they will suddenly magically appear in your brain and hopefully stick. This process involves our short-term memory, or rote memory. It's usually characterized by a large amount of input, various degrees of repetition, and the relatively short amount of time. And short-term memory, as scientific research pointed out, is fallible no matter how old you are, how smart you are, because our brains are just designed that way to filter out irrelevant information. To give you an example, I haven't been back in China for years, and the phone number I used to remember by heart suddenly seemed to elude me. Well, with the exception of my very first phone number, but that's only because it has my birthday in it. For a lot of people, words on the vocab list, however often reviewed or repeated, will still one day be forgotten. Because to them, or at least the way they're approaching it, these words are just random mutations of letters, just the same way phone numbers are just random sequences of numbers. These words have no significance to you. You don't understand how to use them in the context. You've never seen them outside of this list. So of course you'll forget. Even the smartest among us will too. Sure, sometimes you get lucky. You'll remember some words, but one day you'll still forget. And that day usually comes sooner than you expect. That's why I get questions like, Ella, I've forgotten all the words I learned in school. To which I usually respond with, well, you never understood them or remembered them in the first place. Let's do a thought experiment for a minute. Let's say you and I travel abroad and live in a foreign country without having any Chinese speakers around. Will you forget your Chinese? Sure, you might stutter a little bit. Sure, you might even forget how to write certain characters, but you'll still be able to speak your own language because these words are ingrained in your long-term memory, because you've studied these words extensively. And sometimes when people live abroad, they still consume information in their own language online, like 微信公众号文章, am I right? So the key word here is using the language, just how much time you're spending on English, besides staring at a vocabulary list. Another thing happens when people try to memorize vocabulary. They usually spend all their energy and time on memorizing these words that they haven't actually spent enough quality time in the forms of reading, writing, etc., etc. I mentioned this a couple times in my other videos too. But doing this will create an illusion that you've spent a lot of time on vocabulary when you actually haven't. And you'll still find yourself struggling to speak because real life scenarios usually don't call for random testing on this one particular word. However, it does require you to understand a word or understand phrases given a context. It entails that you not only know the meaning of this word or simple Chinese translation of this word, but also how to construct a sentence from scratch based on your knowledge about this word. This might come as a surprise to you, but it's all related. Speaking in a lot of ways is very related to just how many words you know and how well and how much you know these words. What you want to do instead is focus on 1, relevance, and 2, exposure. What do I mean by relevance? Well, it's simply studying the words that are more relevant to your everyday life, that are more common, that are more versatile than the words like, I don't know, propeller and cellular biology, which, believe it or not, is what a lot of people focus their energy on. In fact, it's what a lot of people do exclusively. And exposure is just that, how much time you're spending on English when you take out the time spent on vocab lists. You might be asking, but what about my exams and quizzes? I have teachers writing on my ass, shoving down these vocab lists down my throat. What do I do with them? And sometimes people get offended, or at least jumpy, when I seemingly take away their precious study routine because, well, some people are really good at memorizing vocab. I used to be one of them. To which I'll say, not memorizing vocab isn't saying that vocabulary is not important. It's quite the opposite, actually. Instead of focusing on random mutations of letters and simple translations of the words, you'll focus on the context. You'll involve more reading, which will improve your understanding of the word and will make you run into this word more often than you think. So yeah, with repetition, with more understanding, you'll naturally remember words. To give you an example, I've used the word remember so many times in this video. So if you go look up the word in a dictionary and take one more look at the examples provided in the dictionary maybe, you'll never be able to forget this word, even if you want to. Now you just gotta apply this principle onto other words and your vocabulary will multiply organically and naturally. Another thing that I want to clarify is that even if you just want to focus on standardized tests, say your 高考, your 四级六级, not memorizing vocab lists and understanding how to use these words based on phrases and based on how to construct a sentence, it doesn't contradict with wanting a better score because, these tests don't necessarily test you on the meaning of one particular word. They test you on reading materials, how well and how fast you can understand different sentences. So yeah, I say if you just focus on the reading materials associated with this test, if it's your 高考, then focus on your textbooks in your high school. If it's 四级六级, I don't know, focus on your college textbooks, then you'll be good to go, provided that your grammar and your pronunciation are okay too. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. I've been wanting to do this video for a while now, but I guess I held it off because I thought I made a video about this topic or I didn't explain myself very well. So yeah, now that there are so many videos out there preaching about ways to improve your memory and the overwhelming amount of comments I get about memory and forgetfulness and just vocab in general, I feel like I want to make another extensive video about this issue. If not to convince you to change your routine, then to at least have you know that the words I know, I didn't memorize them. At least not in the way that you think. I'm not super intelligent. I don't have a superhuman memory. And in fact, I pride myself on being reasonable, being not hard on myself. Memory can only take you so far, and most of the time when you involve too much of your short-term memory, things will eventually fade away, and that's not how you study a language. Everything happens in an instant. So if you've never acquainted yourself with just how these words are used in a context, then don't be surprised when you're speechless. Yeah, don't be offended. I'm not asking you to not study vocab. In fact, I'm asking you to spend more energy on vocab. It's gonna feel less painful because you're not trying to force yourself to do anything. You're not shoving these words down your throat. So it's gonna feel a lot more organic and natural. But over time, the results will show. It will pay off. You'll find yourself randomly picking up words like I am right now. I don't know how else to put it. All right, bye.